The call came in just after lunch, one of those moments where nothing feels important until everything suddenly is. I almost ignored it. The number belonged to a regional bank branch downtown, and I assumed it was another automated notice or a pitch for a product I did not need. I was sitting at my desk, glasses low on my nose, reviewing a contract I had already read twice that morning. At 61, I had learned to value silence. Interruptions rarely brought good news, but something made me answer. "Sir," the woman said, her voice careful in a way that immediately tightened my chest. "I need to confirm something with you before we proceed any further." I told her my name. There was a pause. Papers shuffled. A breath taken. "Are you currently inside our Riverside branch?" I remember looking around my office, the framed certificates on the wall, the muted hum of the air conditioner, the clock ticking louder than it ever had before. "No," I said slowly. "I'm at work." "Why?" Another pause, longer this time. "Because your wife is here," she said, "and she's standing next to a man who looks exactly like you. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. It helps more than you know." For a moment I thought I had misheard her. "That's not possible," I said. "My wife is visiting her sister today. She left this morning." "I understand how that sounds," the woman replied, lowering her voice. "But sir, I need you to come here as soon as you can." I ended the call without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my jacket. I told my assistant I had a personal emergency, which was true in a way I did not yet understand. The drive downtown took less than 15 minutes, but my thoughts stretched it into something endless. I kept searching for explanations that didn't exist. A mistake, a misunderstanding, a coincidence so absurd it could be laughed off later. Deep down, something colder had already settled in. The bank sat on a corner I had passed hundreds of times, glass, brick, polished metal. Familiar, safe, or so I thought. When I stepped inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and recycled air, and everything looked perfectly normal. People stood in line. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve. A teller laughed at something a customer said. Then I saw her. Not my wife, but the woman who had called me. She was standing near the service desk, eyes fixed on the door like she had been waiting for me. Relief crossed her face when she saw me, followed quickly by something else. Concern. Unease. "Thank you for coming," she said. "My name is Rosalind." "Where are they?" I asked. She gestured toward a glass-walled office near the back. "They were in there. They left about 10 minutes ago." My stomach dropped. "But before they left," she continued, "they tried to access your joint savings account, the full balance." I stared at her. "How much?" She told me. It was the number my wife and I had spent years building toward. The number we said out loud only when we were feeling hopeful about the future. "They had documentation," Rosalind said quietly. "Convincing documentation." But something felt wrong. She slid a photocopy across the desk. It was an identification card with my name, my address, my height, my weight, and a face that was almost mine. Almost. The nose was slightly wider, the jaw heavier, the eyes set just enough apart to make my skin crawl. "I don't have a brother," I said automatically. Rosalind didn't argue. She only nodded and said something that stayed with me long after I left the bank. "Whoever this man is, he knows you very well." When I got home, my wife's car was not in the driveway. I walked inside the house we had shared for 8 years, surrounded by furniture we chose together. Memories I thought were solid, and I felt, truly felt, for the first time that I might have been living inside a carefully constructed lie, and that whatever had started at the bank was far from over. I did not turn on the lights when I got home. I stood just inside the doorway, keys still in my hand, listening to the quiet like it might confess something if I waited long enough. The house looked the same, but it felt staged now, too neat, too intentional, as if every object had been placed to sell me a version of my own life. I locked the door, then checked it again. My wife was late, not unusual on its own. She was 57 and fiercely independent, always insisting on handling family matters herself. I had admired that about her, trusted it. Now trust felt like a foolish habit I was still trying to break. I walked through the living room slowly, noticing things I had never paid attention to before. The way the throw pillows were aligned perfectly. The lack of dust on surfaces I knew I never cleaned. The faint scent of a cologne I did not wear, hiding beneath the citrus cleaner. That was when I opened the closet. At first glance, nothing seemed off. My jackets, my suits, shirts arranged by color just as she liked them. Then I pushed past the winter coats and froze. There was a jacket I had never owned. It was my size, my style, a dark charcoal color I would have chosen without thinking twice. Beneath it hung a pair of jeans folded the way I folded mine, down to the same worn crease at the knee. Someone had been dressing like me. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of that realization pressing into my chest. The woman at the bank had said the man looked exactly like me, not similar, not close, exactly. The front door opened less than 20 minutes later. I did not move. I heard her keys hit the dish by the door. Her heels crossed the hardwood floor with the same rhythm I had known for years. When she appeared in the doorway, smiling, everything about her looked right. That somehow made it worse. "Hey," she said, "you're home early. How was your sister?" I asked. She did not hesitate, not even a fraction of a second. She launched into details, appointments, traffic, errands, like she had rehearsed them. Maybe she had. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." She frowned, but complied. I placed the jacket on the bed between us. Her eyes went to it immediately. "Is that yours?" she asked. "No," I said. "Is it yours?" She shook her head. "I've never seen it. It was in my closet." Silence stretched between us, not the comfortable kind, the kind that presses against your ears. "The bank called me today," I said. Her face changed then. Not dramatically, just enough. "They said you were there," I continued, "with a man who looked exactly like me." She laughed. It sounded wrong. "That's ridiculous. They showed me his identification." The color drained from her face so quickly it startled me. I leaned forward. "How long were you planning to keep lying?" Her shoulders slumped. Not in guilt, in calculation. "He needed help," she said finally. "Who?" She swallowed. "Someone from my past." I waited. She told me then, not everything, but enough, about a man who had been drifting in and out of her life for years. Someone who looked like me because he had worked very hard to look like me. Someone who studied routines, habits, schedules. Someone who learned people the way predators do. "And you helped him?" I said. She nodded once. "For how long?" "Longer than you think." I stood up. The room felt smaller now, like the walls were inching closer. "The money," I said. "The withdrawals, the paperwork." She did not deny it. I realized then that my marriage had not been falling apart. It had been dismantled piece by piece, quietly, methodically, while I slept beside the person holding the tools. "I never wanted it to go this far," she said. "That's what everyone says when they're caught." She reached for my hand. I pulled away. "I loved you," she insisted. I believed she believed that, which made it worse. I told her to leave. She did not argue. She packed a bag calmly, like someone who had rehearsed this moment too. When she stood in the doorway, she looked at me with something close to regret. "You don't understand how dangerous this is," she said. "I think I'm starting to." After she left, I sat alone in the dark and realized something that made my blood run cold. If I had not answered that call from the bank, I might never have known. And whatever plan they had been building did not end with money. It ended with me disappearing. And that was when I understood the truth. I was no longer uncovering a secret. I was standing in the middle of someone else's unfinished plan. I did not sleep that night. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The refrigerator clicking on, the floorboards settling. A car passing outside that slowed just a second too long. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation from the past few years, searching for cracks I should have seen. By morning, I understood something with uncomfortable clarity. This was not impulsive. It was engineered. I waited until the sun came up before moving. Fear fades a little in daylight, or maybe it just becomes easier to lie to yourself. I made coffee I did not drink and stood at the kitchen counter staring at the door my wife had walked through for the last time. Then I went into the study. She had always handled the paperwork. Bills, insurance, records. She said it stressed her out when I interfered. I had believed that was consideration. In hindsight, it was control. The filing cabinet was locked. That alone told me everything. I found the key after 20 minutes of searching. It was hidden in her jewelry box beneath a bracelet I had given her on our anniversary. The irony was sharp enough to sting. The first folder was labeled medical. Invoices, statements, letters with official-looking letterheads. At a glance, they told a convincing story: treatments, consultations, follow-ups. But when I slowed down and really looked, I saw it. Fonts slightly off, addresses that did not quite match, numbers too neat. They were fake. The second folder made my hands shake. Property documents, deed transfers, authorization forms, a refinancing agreement bearing my signature. Except I had never signed it. The house I bought years before I met her was no longer legally mine. I had to sit down. The third folder was the one that finally broke whatever denial I had left. Photographs, schedules, notes. My routine mapped out in meticulous detail: what time I left for work, when I went to the gym, which nights I stayed late, where I stopped for coffee, even the way I signed my name. There were pages filled with handwriting practice, my handwriting, over and over until it was perfect. And then there was the timeline. It stretched across multiple years, phases, objectives, contingencies. The final note was written in darker ink with firmer strokes. If suspicion escalates, implement exit plan, accident preferred. I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. They had not just been planning to steal from me. They had been planning to erase me. I called the bank first. The woman from the day before answered on the second ring. When I told her what I had found, her voice went very quiet. "I need you to call the police," she said. "Immediately." I did. The officer who arrived listened without interrupting. She was calm, professional, and completely unreactive in the way only people who have seen too much can be. When I showed her the documents, her expression finally changed. "You were close," she said. "Close to what?" She did not soften it. "Losing everything. Possibly your life. They took the files, photographed everything, told me to pack a bag and stay somewhere else for a few days. I checked into a hotel across town under my middle name and paid cash, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. That night my phone rang. It was my wife. "I know you found the papers," she said calmly. "How?" She laughed softly. "Because you always underestimate me." I asked her where he was. She did not answer. "You think this ends with paperwork and police reports?" she continued. "It doesn't. You don't just walk away from people like him." "From you," I corrected. There was silence on the line. "Be careful," she said finally. "You're not as safe as you think." She hung up. 2 days later, the detective called me into her office. She laid out photographs of other men on the table. Different faces, different cities. Same pattern: long marriages, financial stability, sudden accidents. I recognized the look in their eyes: trust. The same trust I had worn without realizing it. "You are the first one who caught it in time," she said. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt hunted. Because people who plan this carefully do not simply walk away when they fail. They adapt. And somewhere out there, a man who wore my face knew I was still breathing. And that meant I was no longer just surviving their plan. I was standing in the way of its completion. They put me back into my own life like a chess piece already marked for sacrifice. The detective explained it carefully, calmly, as if she were outlining a safety drill. I was to return home, resume my routine, go to work, go to the gym, stop for coffee where I always stopped, be visible, predictable. They already know you're suspicious, she said. If you disappear now, they'll assume law enforcement is involved. That makes them cautious. We need them confident enough to make a mistake. Unmarked vehicles appeared on my street within hours, new neighbors who were not new at all, a maintenance van that never seemed to leave, people whose eyes followed reflections instead of faces. I slept in my own bed again that night, fully dressed, lights off, phone in my hand. The house felt hollow without her presence, but not in the way heartbreak hollows you. This was something colder, like discovering your home had been a set, and the actors had simply wrapped for the day. The next morning I followed the schedule she had written down. 7:45 departure, same route, same coffee shop. I did not look around. I did not rush. I did not change a thing. That was when I saw the car. Gray, nondescript, parked 3 houses down. It was gone by the time I came back that evening, but the message was clear. They were watching. The second day the car followed me. Not closely, not obviously, but consistently enough that I noticed it at every red light, every turn. I alerted the detective with a single sentence. She did not ask questions. She simply said, "We see it." By the third day, the waiting became worse than the fear. Fear spikes and fades. Waiting corrodes. I started noticing the smallest things. A shift in air when I entered a room. A reflection that lingered too long in glass. The way my phone battery drained faster than usual. That afternoon, my assistant knocked on my office door. "There's a woman here to see you," she said. "She says she's your wife." My chest locked. She was sitting in the lobby like she belonged there. Calm, composed, wearing the same smile she had perfected over years of lying to me. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Here," I said. "We talk here." Her eyes flicked to the exits, the cameras, the people within earshot. I saw the calculation. "You're in danger," she said softly. "This has gone too far. You planned it to go this far. You don't understand who you're dealing with," she insisted. "He doesn't leave loose ends." I held her gaze. "Neither do I." That was when her mask slipped, just for a moment. And in that moment I saw the woman I had never truly known. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said, voice low. "You could still walk away." "Not this time." She left without another word. That night my phone rang at exactly 9. Unknown number. "You're stubborn," a man's voice said. My voice warped slightly. "That's always been your problem." I did not answer. "We were prepared to be generous," he continued. "You had a very neat exit planned." I felt something settle in my chest then. Not fear, clarity. "You won't get another warning," he said. "Tonight, you choose." The call ended. 10 minutes later, the lock on my front door began to move. Slow, careful, professional. I pressed the button they had given me and waited. Footsteps entered the house. 2 sets, one familiar, one wrong. "Come out," she called softly. "This doesn't have to hurt." I stepped into the light. For the first time, I stood face to face with the man who wore my life like a borrowed coat, close enough to see the differences, close enough to see the emptiness behind his eyes. "This ends now," I said. He smiled, and that was when every light outside exploded on at once. Voices shouted, doors slammed, hands grabbed. The sound of metal hitting the floor echoed through the room. They did not fight. They knew it was over. As they were taken away, my wife, no, the woman I had married, looked back at me one last time, not with anger, with calculation, as if she were already planning something else. And as the house fell silent again, I realized something that sent a chill deeper than fear ever had. People like them do not believe in endings. They believe in pauses, and I knew then that what happened next would decide whether this truly ended or merely changed form. The silence afterward was louder than anything that came before. My house, My house was filled with unfamiliar echoes once the officers left. Chairs out of place, a door hanging slightly crooked on its hinges, the faint smell of cold night air drifting in through an open window no one remembered to close. They told me it was over. They always say that. The man who wore my face and the woman who wore my life were in custody. Separate vehicles, separate rooms, separate interrogations. The detective assured me there was enough evidence to keep them locked away for a very long time. Financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, attempted homicide, words that felt clinical compared to what they had actually done. I spent that night in a monitored apartment, not because I wanted protection, but because sleep had become impossible anywhere else. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the closet, the jacket, the practiced signatures, the timeline ending with the word accident. In the morning, I was taken in to give a formal statement. They showed me things I hadn't seen before. Photographs from other cities, other houses, other men who shared my build, my age range, my quiet routines. Men who had believed their lives were ordinary and safe until they weren't. Some of them had not survived long enough to realize the truth. You changed the pattern, the detective told me. They rushed. That's why they failed. I nodded, but the thought did not comfort me. Because rushing meant desperation, and desperation makes people careless, but also dangerous. 2 days later, the call came. "She wants to speak with you," the detective said. I already knew who she was. I agreed. The room was bare. Metal table, 2 chairs, glass wall. She looked smaller than I remembered, but not weaker. Her eyes were steady, calculating. Still searching for leverage even now. "You look tired," she said. "I finally know the truth," I replied. "That tends to do that." She smiled faintly. "Truth is flexible." "No," I said, "and lies are." She leaned forward. "You think this ends because we were caught?" "Yes," I said. "It ends because I saw you." For the first time, something close to anger flickered across her face. "You were never supposed to," she said. "You were supposed to be like the others." "And yet," I said, "I'm still here." She studied me for a long moment, then sat back. "There will always be someone else," she said quietly. "Someone willing to pretend, someone willing to trust." "That may be true," I replied, "but it won't be you." When I stood to leave, she said my name one last time. Not as a plea, not as a threat, as a reminder. I walked out without looking back. Weeks passed. The house sold. The accounts were untangled. What could be recovered was recovered. What couldn't was gone forever. Strangely, that part hurt less than I expected. What stayed with me were the small things. The sound of keys in a dish. The certainty I once felt when someone smiled at me. The version of myself who believed love could not be weaponized. I was not angry anymore. I was awake. And as I packed the last box and turned off the lights for the final time, I understood something that felt heavier than closure. Surviving wasn't the victory, understanding was. The story did not end in a courtroom. That surprised me. I had imagined some clean conclusion. Verdicts read aloud, doors closing, lives neatly divided into before and after. Instead, the ending came quietly, spread thin across months, in ways that felt almost ordinary. Their faces appeared briefly in the news. Not names I recognized, not details I was allowed to hear. Just another case summarized in a few paragraphs. A sophisticated fraud ring dismantled. Multiple jurisdictions, long sentences expected. Then the attention moved on. That was the part no one warns you about. When something like this happens, people assume survival is the finish line. They do not tell you about the empty space afterward, when the adrenaline drains away and you are left alone with the knowledge that your life was nearly taken apart by someone who once kissed you goodnight. I sold the house. Not because I had to, but because it no longer belonged to me in any way that mattered. Every room held a version of myself that no longer existed. I moved into a smaller place near the water, somewhere quiet where routines felt like choices again instead of vulnerabilities. The detective checked in once more before closing the file. "They won't be getting out," she said, "not in your lifetime." I believed her, and for the first time since that phone call from the bank, I exhaled without forcing myself to. What surprised me most was what I did not feel. I did not feel hatred. Hatred keeps you tethered. What I felt instead was clarity. I understood how carefully they had chosen me. A man in his early 60s, stable, predictable, trusting. A man who believed loyalty was a shared value instead of a strategy. That version of me is gone, but I am not broken because of it. I am precise now. I listen more than I speak. I notice pauses. I trust slowly. And when something feels wrong, I no longer explain it away just to preserve comfort. People ask me if I will ever trust again. The answer is yes, but not blindly. Trust, I learned, is not the absence of doubt. It is the presence of awareness. Sometimes late at night I think about how close I came to vanishing without explanation, about how easily my life could have been folded into a narrative someone else wrote for me. A tragic accident, a grieving widow, a clean exit. That ending belonged to them, this one belongs to me. I still get calls from banks sometimes, routine things, confirmations, offers. Every time my phone rings, I remember the voice that changed everything. And I answer. Because the moment I stopped being invisible was the moment I stayed alive. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.